accurate to just around when a lot of you were born. Around about 1970. What did I say was the source of all authority and power in the first period? The church, religion. From 1500 onwards, the source of all knowledge, authority and power, or the source of all authority and power, was knowledge. You see, in this period of time, God begins to recede into the background and he becomes this immutable, unreachable God out there. And what happens is, we've now got a society that says, wait a minute, we want something more objective. We want truth that we can prove in a lab. We want truth that is far more provable. And so this period of time opens the way for things like the Industrial Revolution and scientific discovery. You've got people like Galileo. Who's Galileo? What was he? Yeah. Didn't hear any of that. What was he? Astronomer, scientist. He's actually accredited with being the father of modern science. And in fact, he was the one who supported the Copernican theory, which was what? What did old Copernicus actually believe? That the Earth revolved around the Sun. Up until that time, for 1500 years, people believed that the Sun revolved around the Earth. And Galileo came out and said, Copernicus is right. The Earth revolves around the Sun. And you know what? The Catholic Church branded Galileo as a heretic for believing it. And he escaped the Inquisition by that much. You can read about it somewhere. It's a fascinating story. So this is a period of time where Columbus sets up. This is where Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci paint and sculpture themselves into immortality. It's a time of colonialism, the great explorers, people migration. And in the context of Christianity, this is the time of Luther and the Reformation. This is the time of the modern missionary movement, where William Carey and Hudson Taylor and the Moravians and all of these people suddenly went out into the whole world and wanted to reach the world for Christ. The world, as it were, became a place that people wanted to explore and discover and find out about. And it was also the birth of a world where man believed that he could become the master of his own destiny. You have to understand that with all of this discovery, with all of this travel, with all of this knowledge, man came to believe that a utopia was possible. Finally, after 18 or 1900 years, man could get to a point where he could discover absolutely everything there was to know. And so there was tremendous hope just near the end of the 20th century, 19th century. But you know, somehow the 20th century, and you need to understand this, the 20th century was very, very significant, unbelievably significant, because it destroyed literally everything that had been built up in that previous 400 years. I'll tell you why. It began with things like World War I in the Somme. I don't know if you've read the history of that. You know, in the Battle of Somme on the very first day, there were 10,000 casualties. You read of battles where there were thousands of people killed just in a few days and so on. This is right on top of a period of history whereby man believed in utopia. And then shortly after that, you had the Great Depression. And then you had World War II, and you had Auschwitz. Then you had the Gulag in Russia. And then you had Hiroshima and Vietnam and Rwanda and 9/11. And then throughout the 20th century you had this endless list of tyrants like Lenin in Russia and Idi Amin in Uganda and Tito in Yugoslavia and Hitler in Germany and Pol Pot in Cambodia. And so what the 20th century did, it literally crushed this idealism that man could find a way to live in utopia. It crushed this thing that you could educate man to some kind of perfection. You know, it was almost like another Tower of Babel experience. Remember they built the Tower of Babel and they tried to get up to heaven and reach God? It was like in the 20th century, man felt like he was almost there, and in 1 century the whole tower fell. You can understand how serious the 20th century was. It was a devastating century for humanity. And that gave birth to this third period of time, which we're in now, which is commonly known as the postmodern world. And you've grown up in it. That's why I say a lot of you are probably not even aware that much has changed. But whereas religion was the source of all authority in the first period, whereas knowledge was the source of all authority in the modern world, the interesting part about the postmodern world is there is no defining source of authority in a postmodern world. None at all. You see, the modern world was replaced by scepticism and relativism and mysticism. In a postmodern world, traditional views of God are just like an old dream. And because religion abhors a vacuum, we've had this resurgence of old things like neo-pantheism and neo-Gnosticism. Now let me just explain that. Neo-pantheism, what's pantheism? God is everything. Okay? My folder is part of God. Okay? That's pantheism. So there's been, have you noticed that in this modern day spirituality, it's just so nice because God is everywhere and He's everything. And you know, you used to be able to swat a fly, but you can't do that anymore. We've got to be so conscious of just about everything because it's all God. That's neo-pantheism. Neo-Gnosticism, anybody know what Gnosticism is? Secret knowledge. Gnosticism says, God is inside of me, but you know what? He's all locked up because I'm in a body. And if I can just find the secrets of spirituality, God He can be set free. This God that I am. And so that's the modern form of spirituality. And everyone today wants to talk about spirituality. We even talk about Chris Judd being the spiritual leader of the Carlton Football Club, don't we? Everything today, that term spirituality has reappeared and resurfaced in just about every area of life. And so the view we have today of as postmoderns is much more mysterious and chaotic. In fact, listen to this bloke, Kevin Van Hoover. You heard of him? I haven't heard of him. But here's what he says. He believes that most people we are trying to reach with the gospel, I'll talk about Christians here, most people today that we're trying to reach with the gospel, and I quote this, reject unifying, totalising and universal schemes in favour of a new emphasis on difference, plurality, fragmentation and complexity. Postmoderns are suspicious of truth claims of getting it right. Do you understand how difficult that's become for the church? Because the one thing the church kind of used to have going for it was, it used to be able to say, look, you might disagree with us, but we believe that this is what God says. And do you know what they're saying now? That's nice. We're happy for you. But you know what? There's millions of things we think are truth. And we just all believe something different. So people are not even fighting anymore. They're not even arguing about the truth. They're saying truth is, well, whatever you want to make it. It's like there's been this shift from what's known as meta-narrative. Meta is big, all-encompassing. A meta-narrative is all have sinned and come short of God's glory. Do you know that verse in Romans chapter 3? That's a meta-narrative. All. When the Bible says God so loved the world, what's the world? My world? Everything. That's a meta-narrative. God loved the world. What our postmodern world is saying is, don't be stupid. There cannot be one meta-narrative that in all situations, at all times, with the same message. That is ludicrous. So we need to have micro-narratives. So we're all kind of trying to discover God in our own context. And we're happy for you Christians because you've got a kind of a Western Christian background. You do it that way, but don't expect that to translate over into people in amongst the Red Indians in America or amongst people in other